The rain came down in sheets that November evening, turning the streets of Portland into rivers of reflected neon and despair. Beneath the Morrison Bridge overpass, James "Ghost" Mercer sat cross-legged on a piece of cardboard, his back against the cold concrete pillar, the smell of wet asphalt mixed with the faint odor of engine oil and garbage from the dumpsters 50 feet away. His military-issue duffel bag, faded green, covered in patches he'd sewn himself during deployments, served as his pillow. Inside it, 3 T-shirts, 1 pair of jeans, a first aid kit he'd stolen from a VA clinic, and a photograph of his daughter he hadn't seen in 6 years. Ghost was 43, but looked 60. His beard had gone grey in streaks, his hands bore scars from fights he barely remembered, and his eyes carried the particular emptiness of men who'd seen too much and spoken too little. The tattoo on his left forearm, an eagle clutching a rifle above the words, 2nd Battalion, Iron Promise, was the only evidence that he'd once been Staff Sergeant James Mercer, decorated combat engineer, 2 tours in Afghanistan, 3 Bronze Stars collecting dust in a storage unit he could no longer afford. The descent had been slow, then sudden. He'd come home in 2018 to find his wife remarried, his savings drained by medical bills from surgeries the VA had delayed for years, and his mind fractured by PTSD that made every loud noise sound like incoming mortar fire. He'd tried working construction, but the panic attacks made him a liability. He'd tried the shelters, but the crowds triggered his combat reflexes. So he'd chosen the streets, where the only person he could hurt was himself. Tonight, the rain was relentless. Most of the other homeless had moved to the downtown shelters, but Ghost stayed. He preferred the solitude beneath the bridge, the rhythm of traffic overhead, the way the city's heartbeat felt distant and muffled. He sipped cold coffee from a styrofoam cup, his third of the day, rationing the caffeine to stay alert. Street living had taught him that sleep was dangerous. Your belongings vanished, or worse, you woke up in a hospital with cracked ribs and no memory of the beating. That's when he heard it, the deep, guttural rumble of a motorcycle cutting through the rain. Ghost looked up to see a black Harley-Davidson rolling beneath the overpass, its rider hunched against the storm. The bike coughed once, twice, then sputtered to a stop 20 feet away. The rider cursed, kicked the stand down, and pulled off his helmet. He was a big man, 6'3", barrel-chested with a grey beard and a leather vest covered in patches. The back of his vest read, "Iron Riders Massey, Road Captain." The man stared at his bike with the frustration of someone who knew machines intimately and hated when they betrayed him. Ghost recognized the look. He'd worn it 1,000 times in Kandahar, working on Humvees and generators in 100-degree heat, while insurgents lobbed mortars from the hills. Without thinking, he stood up, grabbed a small tool pouch from his duffel, and walked over. "Carburetor," Ghost said quietly. His voice was rough from disuse, like gravel scraping metal. The rider turned, surprised. Up close, Ghost could see the patches on his vest. Reaper. Beneath it, rows of military insignia, Marine Corps, Iraq War veteran, Purple Heart. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. The unspoken recognition of men who'd walked through fire. "You know bikes?" Reaper asked. "I know engines," Ghost replied. "Army? Combat engineer." Reaper stepped back, watching as Ghost knelt in the rain, opened the carburetor housing, and examined the fuel line. His hands moved with precision despite the tremor that plagued them, a side effect of medications he could no longer afford. Within minutes, he'd identified the clog, cleared it with a thin wire from his toolkit, and reassembled the system. He didn't speak during the work. He didn't need to. This was muscle memory, the only part of his old life that still functioned. When the engine roared back to life, Reaper grinned. He reached into his wallet and pulled out 2 20s. "What do I owe you?" Ghost shook his head. "Nothing." "Come on, man. You just saved me 2 hours in the rain." "Brothers don't charge brothers," Ghost said simply. He turned to walk back to his tent. Reaper watched him go, studying the limp in his left leg, the way his shoulders hunched against some invisible weight. Then he noticed the tattoo, the eagle, the battalion number, the words that every veteran recognized: Iron Promise. It was the motto of the 2nd Engineer Battalion, the unit that had built bridges under fire in Helmand Province, while Reaper's Marine platoon provided cover. He'd lost friends because those bridges didn't get built fast enough. He'd also lived because some of them did. "Hey," Reaper called out. Ghost stopped but didn't turn around. "You got a name?" "Ghost." "Your real name?" A pause. "James Mercer, Staff Sergeant, retired." Reaper nodded slowly. He mounted his bike, then hesitated. Something about this moment felt significant in a way he couldn't articulate. As he prepared to leave, Ghost walked back over. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill, his last money until the shelter served dinner at 8. His hand shook slightly as he held it out. "For gas," Ghost said. "Road's long." Reaper stared at the bill. $5. This man had nothing, no home, no job, no family, and he was offering his last $5 to a stranger with a working motorcycle and a wallet full of cash. The gesture hit Reaper like a punch to the chest. He took the bill carefully, as if it were made of glass. "I'll remember this," Reaper said quietly. Ghost nodded once and walked back to his tent. He didn't see Reaper sit on his bike for a full minute, staring at the $5 bill in the rain. He didn't see Reaper pull out his phone and start typing a message into a group chat titled Iron Riders, West Coast Chapter. And he didn't hear the first replies start coming in, each one a variation of the same word: when. By the time Ghost fell asleep that night, wrapped in his torn blanket with the sound of rain drumming overhead, Reaper had already made 4 phone calls, sent 23 text messages, and set something in motion that would change Ghost's life forever. The $5 bill sat in Reaper's wallet, tucked behind his military ID, a reminder of what honor looked like when it came from a man who had every reason to have none left. Tomorrow, the thunder would return, but this time it wouldn't be rain. Reaper rode through the rain for another hour before pulling into the Iron Riders clubhouse on the outskirts of Portland. The building was an old warehouse converted into biker headquarters. Concrete floors, a bar made from reclaimed timber, walls covered with photographs of rides, rallies, and fallen brothers. The smell of motor oil, leather, and cigarette smoke hung in the air like incense. At this hour, only a few members remained. Axel, the club's enforcer, polishing his chrome, Maya, the club's secretary and medic, reviewing charity event logistics, and Tiny, a 300-pound mechanic whose nickname was Pure Irony. They looked up when Reaper walked in, dripping wet, his expression unreadable. He said nothing as he walked to the bar, poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon, and downed it in one swallow. Then he turned to face them. "I need to tell you about someone I met tonight," Reaper began. His voice was steady, but carried an edge that made everyone stop what they were doing. "His name is Ghost, James Mercer, Staff Sergeant, 2nd Engineer Battalion. The man is living under the Morrison Bridge, in a tent held together with duct tape and faith." Maya frowned. "Homeless vet?" "Homeless vet who gave me his last $5. Reaper said. He pulled the crumpled bill from his wallet and placed it on the bar. "My bike broke down. He fixed it in the rain, wouldn't take payment, then handed me this. Said it was for gas. Said the road is long." The room went silent. These were people who understood the language of gestures, who knew that actions revealed character more than words ever could. Tiny spoke first, his voice surprisingly soft for a man his size. "What do we know about him?" "Not much," Reaper admitted. "But I recognized his tattoo. Iron Promise. That's 2nd Engineer Battalion. They built the bridges we crossed in Helmand. Half our platoon would have died without those bridges." He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. "This man built roads under fire so Marines like me could survive. Now he's sleeping under a bridge in his own country." Axel stood up, his jaw tight. "What do you need?" Reaper looked at each of them in turn. "I need to make some calls. I need to reach out to every chapter between here and San Diego." Every vet group, every MC that still believes in the code, because tomorrow morning I want to give Ghost something back. Maya was already on her laptop. Give me 10 minutes. I'll pull up his service record if it's public, see if we can verify his story. It's not about verification, Reaper said sharply. Then he softened. But yeah, do it. I want to know who we're helping. While Maya typed, Reaper began making calls. First, he contacted the Iron Riders chapters in Eugene, Salem, and Seattle. Each president answered within 2 rings. That was the rule, you answered when a brother called, no matter the hour. He told them the story simply. Homeless veteran. Last $5 tomorrow morning. Morrison Bridge. The responses were immediate and unanimous. We're in. How many riders do you need? Next, he called the War Dogs MC, a club made up entirely of combat veterans. Their president, a former Army Ranger named Cole, listened in silence before saying, I'll bring everyone we've got. Text me the coordinates. Then the Forgotten Soldiers MC, the Liberty Riders, the Veterans Brotherhood, the Steel Horses. Each call followed the same pattern. Reaper told the story, the club committed, and within minutes riders were gassing up their bikes and checking their routes. The message spread like wildfire through encrypted apps and veteran networks. By midnight, chapters as far as Northern California and Eastern Washington had heard about Ghost and were mobilizing. Maya looked up from her laptop, her expression somber. Found him. Staff Sergeant James William Mercer. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 2009 and 2012. 3 Bronze Stars, 1 for pulling 2 soldiers out of a burning vehicle after an IED strike. Honorable discharge in 2014. After that, she trailed off, scrolling through public records. Divorce finalized in 2016. Bankruptcy in 2017. Last known address was a VA transitional housing facility in Gresham. He was discharged from there in 2018 for behavioral issues. Behavioral issues, Tiny repeated bitterly. That's code for PTSD they wouldn't treat properly. Reaper slammed his hand on the bar, making the bottles jump. That's exactly what it means. This man earned 3 Bronze Stars, and we thanked him by putting him on the street. He took a breath, forcing himself calm. Tomorrow, we fix that. Tiny, I need you to start making calls to veteran housing programs. Maya, contact every VA advocate you know. Axel, reach out to the job networks, construction, security, anything that hires vets with combat experience. What about money? Maya asked. Reaper pulled out his phone and opened the club's emergency fund app. The Iron Riders maintained a charitable account for exactly these situations, helping veterans, supporting military families, paying for funerals when brothers fell. The current balance was $8,400. Without hesitation, Reaper transferred $5,000 to a separate account he created on the spot, Ghost Recovery Fund. I just put in $5,000, he said. I'm texting every chapter we've contacted and asking for donations. Whatever people can give, we're going to hand Ghost enough money to get off the street, get into housing, and have a buffer while we find him work. By 1 a.m., the donations started rolling in. $20 from a rider in Tacoma, $50 from a chapter in Sacramento, $100 from a veteran in Boise who'd heard about Ghost through a friend of a friend. The numbers climbed steadily, $6,000, $10,000, $15,000. Reaper watched in silence, his throat tight. This was why he joined the Iron Riders 15 years ago, not for the parties or the image, but for moments like this, when the Brotherhood proved it was real. At 2:30 a.m., his phone rang. It was Cole from the War Dogs. We've got 63 riders confirmed. We'll be there by 6 a.m., but Reaper, I need to ask, does Ghost know we're coming? No, Reaper said, and that's how I want it. Let him wake up to this. Let him see what it looks like when the people he fought for actually show up. Cole was quiet for a moment. Copy that. See you at dawn. By 4 a.m., Reaper had confirmations from over 300 riders. The plan was simple. They would gather at a staging area 2 miles from the Morrison Bridge, then ride in convoy at first light. No fanfare, no speeches, just an army of motorcycles surrounding Ghost's tent in silent salute, a reminder that he wasn't alone, that he'd never been forgotten. Reaper finally allowed himself to sleep around 5 a.m., but not before checking the donation total one last time. It had reached $38,000. By morning he knew it would cross 40. He thought about Ghost sleeping under that bridge, wrapped in a torn blanket, unaware that hundreds of strangers were riding through the night because of a $5 bill and the kind of honor that couldn't be bought or taught. If you're wondering what it looks like when true brotherhood shows up, you're about to find out. Comment below where you're watching from, and let's see how many cities are following Ghost's story. Tomorrow morning, when the sun rose over Portland, Ghost would wake up to the sound of thunder, and this time the storm would be on his side. The sky over Portland was still dark when the first motorcycles began arriving at the staging area, an abandoned lot behind a closed industrial park 2 miles from the Morrison Bridge. Reaper stood in the center, his breath visible in the cold November air, watching headlights cut through the pre-dawn darkness like fireflies converging on a single point. The rumble of engines created a low, continuous thunder that vibrated through the ground. The Iron Riders came first, rolling in with military precision. 32 bikes, each rider wearing their leather cuts, faces weathered by wind and years on the road. Maya pulled up on her Sportster, medical kit strapped to her sissy bar. Tiny arrived in his pickup truck, towing a trailer loaded with supplies, blankets, food, water, a portable heater. Axel parked his bike and immediately began organizing riders into formation. Then the out-of-town chapters started arriving. The War Dogs MC from Salem, 63 riders strong, their cuts adorned with combat patches from every branch of service. The Forgotten Soldiers from Eugene, 40 riders, many of them Vietnam vets with gray beards and eyes that had seen too much. The Liberty Riders from Seattle, a mixed group of active-duty military and veterans, 38 bikes gleaming under the parking lot lights. Cole, president of the War Dogs, walked over to Reaper and clasped his hand. He was a tall black man with a shaved head and a scar running from his left eye to his jaw, a souvenir from Fallujah. "We brought cash," Cole said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. "Another $4,000 from our chapter." "How much are we at?" "42,000, as of 20 minutes ago," Reaper replied. His voice was rough from lack of sleep and too many phone calls. "But this isn't just about money. It's about showing this man he's not invisible anymore." Cole nodded. "I briefed my riders. No one approaches Ghost unless he initiates. We're there to honor him, not overwhelm him. Some of my guys have PTSD triggers, crowds, loud noises. I'm guessing Ghost might too." "Exactly," Reaper said. "We make this about respect, not spectacle." By 5:45 a.m., the staging area held over 400 motorcycles. Riders stood in clusters, talking quietly, sharing coffee from thermoses, checking their bikes one last time. The diversity was striking. Men and women ranging from their 20s to their 70s, black, white, Latino, Asian, all unified by leather and chrome and the unspoken code of the road. Many wore military patches, Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard. Some had Purple Hearts sewn into their vests. Others bore the insignia of units that had fought in wars spanning 5 decades. Reaper climbed onto the bed of Tiny's pickup truck, using it as a makeshift stage. The crowd quieted immediately, 400 pairs of eyes turning toward him. He didn't use a microphone. He didn't need one. His voice carried the authority of someone who'd led men in combat. "Most of you don't know me personally," Reaper began. "And most of you don't know the man we're riding for. But I'm going to tell you who he is, because he deserves that much." He pulled the $5 bill from his wallet and held it up. "Last night, my bike broke down in the rain. A homeless man fixed it. When I tried to pay him, he refused. Said brothers don't charge brothers. Then, as I was leaving, he gave me this. His last $5. Told me it was for gas because the road is long." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Reaper continued. That man is Staff Sergeant James Mercer, call sign Ghost. He served 2 tours in Afghanistan with the 2nd Engineer Battalion. He built the bridges our units crossed under fire. He pulled soldiers out of burning vehicles. He earned 3 Bronze Stars defending this country. And now he sleeps under a bridge in a tent held together with duct tape. The anger in the crowd was palpable, a collective fury at a system that had failed one of their own. But Reaper raised his hand, tempering it. We're not here to be angry. We're here to be the answer. In about 10 minutes, we're going to ride to the Morrison Bridge. We're going to surround Ghost's tent, and we're going to remind him that the warrior's code still exists, that when you fight for your brothers, they fight for you. He gestured to Maya, who stepped forward holding a large envelope. This envelope contains $42,000 in cash, donated by chapters from 12 states. It's enough to get Ghost into housing, buy him clothes, cover his medical needs, and give him breathing room while we find him work. But more than the money, we're giving him this. Reaper tapped his chest, over his heart. We're giving him the knowledge that he's not forgotten, that his service mattered, that he still has a family. The crowd erupted in the rumble of revving engines, the biker equivalent of applause. Reaper let it build for a moment, then raised his hand again. Rules of engagement. We ride slow. No burnouts, no showboating. When we arrive, we form a perimeter around his tent and shut off our engines. We stand in silence until he comes out. If he's triggered, if he's scared, we back off immediately. This is about honoring him, not traumatizing him. Understood? 400 voices answered in unison. Understood. Reaper climbed down from the truck. Axel approached, holding a walkie-talkie. I've got spotters positioned along the route. Police have been notified. They're sending 2 patrol cars to manage traffic, but they're staying hands-off. They know what this is about. Good, Reaper said. He looked at the eastern horizon, where the first hint of grey light was beginning to bleed through the darkness. It's time. The procession formed with practiced efficiency. Reaper took point, flanked by Cole and the presidents of the other major chapters. Behind them, the riders arranged themselves in staggered formation. 4 across, then 6, then 8, the ranks growing wider as the convoy stretched back nearly a quarter mile. The sound was overwhelming, a mechanical symphony of 400 engines idling in sync, each one a heartbeat in a living organism made of steel and determination. At precisely 6 a.m., Reaper kicked his bike into gear and rolled forward. The convoy followed, moving at 25 miles per hour through the empty streets of Portland. Streetlights flickered overhead. A few early morning joggers stopped to stare, pulling out phones to record the spectacle. By the time the convoy reached the Morrison Bridge, the sun had broken the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Beneath the overpass, Ghost slept. He dreamed of Kandahar, the heat, the dust, the sound of mortars whistling through the air. In his dream, he was building a bridge across a ravine while his platoon provided cover fire. The bridge kept collapsing, no matter how many times he reinforced it, and he could hear his commanding officer screaming at him to work faster, faster, faster. He woke to the sound of thunder. At first, Ghost thought it was a storm, but storms didn't sound like this, rhythmic, mechanical, growing louder with each second. He sat up in his tent, his heart pounding, adrenaline spiking. His hand instinctively reached for the knife he kept in his boot. The noise was coming from all directions, surrounding him, closing in. Then it stopped. Ghost is about to step out of his tent and see something that will restore his faith in humanity. If you've made it this far, take a second to like this video and let me know in the comments. Have you ever witnessed a random act of kindness that changed someone's life? Because what happens next is something Ghost will never forget. 400 engines fell silent at once. In the sudden quiet, Ghost could hear his own breathing, ragged and fast. He unzipped his tent slowly, squinting against the morning light, and stepped outside. What he saw made him freeze. Motorcycles, hundreds of them, arranged in a massive semicircle around his tent, chrome gleaming in the dawn, riders standing beside their bikes in absolute silence. Every single person faced him. And as Ghost emerged fully from his tent, blinking in confusion and fear, every single rider raised their right hand to their forehead in a military salute. Ghost's legs nearly gave out. He staggered backward, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. This couldn't be real. This had to be another hallucination, another trick his broken brain was playing on him. But the cold air on his face was real. The smell of exhaust and leather was real. And the 400 people standing in silent tribute were real. Reaper stepped forward, still holding his salute. He waited until Ghost, moving on instinct and muscle memory, returned the salute. Only then did Reaper lower his hand and speak. "Staff Sergeant Mercer," Reaper said, his voice carrying across the lot. "We're here because last night you gave me your last $5. You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything. But you gave anyway, because that's who you are. And we're here to tell you something." He walked closer, stopping 10 feet away. Ghost's eyes were wide, his hands shaking. Reaper could see the trauma there, the years of pain, but also something else, a flicker of hope trying to reignite. "You are not forgotten," Reaper said. "Your service mattered, your sacrifice mattered, and you are not alone." He held out the envelope. Ghost stared at it, then at Reaper, then at the hundreds of faces watching him with a mixture of respect and sorrow and determination. Slowly, hesitantly, he reached out and took the envelope. "What is this?" Ghost's voice was barely a whisper. "It's a start," Reaper said. "Open it." Ghost's hands trembled as he opened the envelope. Inside were stacks of bills, 20s, 50s, hundreds, bound with rubber bands. He pulled out the first stack, staring at it like it was a foreign object, something his brain couldn't quite categorize. His lips moved silently, counting, but the numbers didn't make sense. There was too much. This couldn't be real. $42,000, Reaper said quietly, donated by riders from 12 states. Every person here either gave money or rode through the night to be here, because of what you did, because of who you are. Ghost looked up, his eyes glistening. I don't understand. I just gave you $5. I didn't—" "You gave me everything you had," Reaper interrupted. His voice was firm but gentle, the tone of someone who understood trauma and wouldn't let shame take root. "You had nothing, and you still gave. That tells us who you are. That tells us you're the kind of man worth fighting for." The words hit Ghost like a physical blow. He stumbled backward, sitting down hard on the concrete. The envelope fell from his hands, bills scattering in the morning breeze. Several riders moved to help, but Reaper raised a hand, stopping them. This moment belonged to Ghost. He needed to process it on his own terms. Ghost put his face in his hands, his shoulders shook, and then, for the first time in 7 years, he wept. Not the silent tears he'd shed alone in his tent, but deep, wrenching sobs that tore through him like shrapnel. He cried for the years lost, for the friends who hadn't made it home, for the family he'd destroyed, for the man he used to be, and the wreckage he'd become. The sound was raw and broken, and every veteran present recognized it, the sound of a dam finally breaking, of pain too long held inside. Maya was the first to approach. She knelt beside Ghost, not touching him, but close enough that he could feel her presence. "It's okay," she said softly. "You're safe. Let it out." Ghost looked up at her, his face streaked with tears. "I didn't think anyone cared. I thought everyone had forgotten." "We didn't forget," Maya said. She gestured to the crowd behind her. "None of us did, and we're not leaving until you know that." Tiny walked over, carrying a folding chair and a bottle of water. He set the chair down gently. "Sir, you might want to sit. We've got some things to discuss, and you look like you could use a break." Ghost allowed himself to be guided into the chair. He took the water bottle with shaking hands, drank half of it in one long pull, and then looked around at the sea of faces. Some were young, barely out of their 20s. Others were old, their beards white and their eyes carrying the weight of decades, but all of them looked at him with the same expression: respect. Reaper pulled up a second chair and sat facing Ghost. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "Today, we're getting you off this street. We've already contacted veteran housing programs, and we have 3 facilities willing to take you immediately. 1 in Gresham, 1 in Beaverton, 1 downtown. You pick which one feels right, and we'll get you moved in today." Ghost blinked. "I can't afford." "First 3 months are paid in full," Reaper said. "After that, we're going to find you work. We've got connections in construction, security, logistics. Places that hire veterans and don't ask stupid questions about gaps in employment." Axel stepped forward, holding a clipboard. "We've also set up appointments for you at the VA. Medical eval, mental health screening, benefits review. You've got 3 bronze stars. There's disability compensation you should have been receiving years ago. We're going to make sure you get it." Ghost shook his head, overwhelmed. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." Cole, the War Dogs president, spoke up from the crowd. "We know enough. You're 2nd Engineer Battalion. You built bridges in Helmand Province in 2011. My platoon crossed one of those bridges during a firefight. If you hadn't built it, we would have been trapped. 7 of us made it out alive because of your work." He paused, his voice thick. "I've been trying to find you for 14 years. To say thank you. Looks like I finally got the chance." Ghost stared at Cole, something flickering in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or just the ghost of a memory. "Helmand, 2011. That was a bad month." "It was," Cole agreed. "But you got us through it, and now we're going to get you through this." One by one, other veterans stepped forward, sharing their stories. A woman from the Liberty Riders, whose brother had served with Ghost in Kandahar. A Navy vet who'd been on the transport ship that brought Ghost's battalion home. A young Army sergeant who'd read about the 2nd Engineers in training and had been inspired to join the combat engineers because of their legacy. Each story was a thread, weaving Ghost back into the fabric of the community he'd thought had abandoned him. By the time the sun was fully up, Ghost had stopped crying. He sat in the chair, still clutching the envelope, listening to people tell him that his life had mattered, that his service had saved lives, that he was valued. The words washed over him like rain on parched earth, soaking into cracks he hadn't known existed. Reaper stood and addressed the crowd. "All right, listen up. We need volunteers to help Ghost pack his gear and transport it to whichever housing facility he chooses. We need someone to take him shopping for clothes, toiletries, basics. And we need a point person to coordinate the VA appointments and job interviews." Hands shot up immediately. Tiny volunteered his truck for transport. Maya offered to handle the VA coordination. She'd worked as a VA advocate before joining the Iron Riders. A woman named Carmen, a member of the Forgotten Soldiers, stepped forward. "I work in social services. I can help navigate the housing paperwork and make sure he doesn't get lost in the system." Ghost watched all of this happening around him, still struggling to believe it was real. "I don't know what to say," he finally managed. Reaper crouched down in front of him, eye to eye. "You don't have to say anything, just accept it. Let people help you. That's all we're asking." Ghost nodded slowly. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the $5 bill Reaper had returned to him the night before. He held it out. "You should keep this. It's part of the story now." Reaper took the bill and tucked it back into his wallet, behind his military ID. "I'll keep it, and every time I look at it, I'll remember what real honor looks like." The crowd began to disperse into working groups. Some riders stayed to help Ghost pack his tent and belongings, which took less than 20 minutes because he owned so little. Others made phone calls, confirming appointments and logistics. A few went to buy breakfast, returning with coffee and sandwiches that Ghost ate mechanically, his mind still reeling. By 9 a.m., the plan was set. Ghost had chosen the housing facility in Gresham. It was quieter, less crowded, with private rooms instead of dormitories. Tiny's truck was loaded with Ghost's meager possessions, plus donations of clothes, blankets, and household items that riders had brought. Maya had scheduled a full medical evaluation for the following morning, and Carmen had expedited the housing paperwork. Before they left, Reaper gathered the core group: Ghost, Maya, Tiny, Axel, Cole, and Carmen in a circle. "This is day one," Reaper said. "This is the easy part. The hard part starts tomorrow, when Ghost has to rebuild his life. But here's the thing, he's not doing it alone. Every person here today is part of his support network now. We check in, we follow up. We don't let him fall through the cracks again." He turned to Ghost. "You with us?" Ghost looked at each face in turn. These were strangers who'd become family in the span of 3 hours. People who'd seen the worst version of him and decided he was worth saving anyway. He thought about the $5 bill, about the moment of kindness that had triggered this avalanche of grace. And for the first time in 7 years, he allowed himself to hope. "I'm with you," Ghost said. His voice was stronger now, steadier. "I don't know how to repay this, but I'm with you." "You already repaid it," Reaper said. "You gave me your last $5. That was the spark. Now we're just fanning the flame." As the convoy prepared to escort Ghost to his new home, a local news van pulled up. A reporter got out, camera crew in tow, but Reaper intercepted them immediately. "No interviews, no cameras. This isn't a publicity stunt. This is a private matter between veterans." The reporter started to argue, but Cole stepped up beside Reaper, his imposing frame and scarred face making the message clear. The news crew backed off, though they recorded the convoy from a distance as it rolled out. Ghost rode in the passenger seat of Tiny's truck, watching the motorcycles form an honor guard around them. The rumble of engines was a physical presence, a reminder that he wasn't alone anymore. As they pulled onto the highway, headed toward Gresham and the start of his new life, Ghost allowed himself to look forward instead of back. The road was long, but for the first time in 7 years, he wasn't walking it alone. The veteran housing facility in Gresham was a 3-story brick building on a quiet street lined with maple trees. When Ghost arrived, escorted by motorcycles that filled the parking lot, the facility director, a former Army nurse named Patricia, was waiting on the front steps. "Staff Sergeant Mercer," she said, extending her hand. "Welcome home." Ghost's room was on the 2nd floor, a private space about 12 by 15 feet, with a single bed, a desk, a dresser, and a window overlooking the street. It wasn't much, but to someone who'd been sleeping in a tent for years, it was a palace. Patricia explained the rules: no drugs, no alcohol on premises, mandatory participation in at least 1 group therapy session per week, curfew at midnight unless pre-approved. "We're not a prison," Patricia said, "but we do have structure. A lot of our residents find that helpful." When Ghost returned to his room, he found that the bikers had already brought up his belongings. His duffel bag sat on the bed, along with several boxes of donated items, clothes still tagged from the store, toiletries, a winter coat, boots. Maya had also left a folder containing his scheduled appointments. VA medical evaluation tomorrow at 10 a.m., benefits review on Thursday, job placement consultation the following Monday. Reaper knocked on the doorframe. "You good?" Ghost turned. "I'm scared. I haven't lived inside in 7 years. I don't know if I remember how." "Then you learn," Reaper said simply. "1 day at a time, and if you stumble, we pick you up. That's the deal." Maya appeared behind Reaper, medical kit in hand. "Mind if I do a quick check?" Ghost nodded. Maya was professional and efficient, checking his blood pressure, listening to his lungs, examining the tremor in his hands. When she finished, she sat down across from him. "Your blood pressure is high, but not critical," she said. "The tremor could be neurological, medication-related, or anxiety. The VA eval tomorrow will give us answers. In the meantime, I'm leaving you sleep aids and basic pain meds. If you need anything before tomorrow, panic attack, flashback, anything, you call me." She handed him a card with her number. Day or night. Over the next few hours, Ghost met more members of the support network. Carmen, the social worker, walked him through housing paperwork and financial aid programs. Axel stopped by with a list of construction companies actively hiring veterans. Cole brought dinner and sat with Ghost while he ate, sharing stories about Helmand Province. By evening, the bikers began leaving. Each one stopped by Ghost's room to say goodbye, to shake his hand, to remind him he had their numbers. When the last motorcycle rumbled out, Ghost stood at his window, watching the taillights disappear. The silence was deafening. For 7 years, he'd lived with constant city noise. Now, in this quiet room, the absence of sound felt oppressive. His mind filled the void with memories, incoming mortars, screaming soldiers, burning vehicles. He gripped the windowsill, forcing himself to breathe. There was a soft knock. Patricia stood in the hallway, holding tea. Thought you might need this. First night is always hard. Ghost took the mug gratefully. Does it get easier? Eventually, Patricia said, but not in a straight line. You'll have good days and bad days. The key is not letting the bad days convince you that progress isn't happening. She paused. You have group therapy tomorrow at 7 p.m. after your VA appointment. I'd recommend attending. After she left, Ghost unpacked his duffel bag, 3 t-shirts, 1 pair of jeans, the first aid kit, and the photograph of his daughter. He stared at the photo for a long time. Emily would be 14 now. He hadn't seen her since she was 8. The guilt was a physical weight in his chest. He placed the photo on the desk, then opened the boxes of donated clothes. At the bottom of one box was a leather jacket, with a note pinned to the collar. Every warrior needs armor. Reaper. Ghost put on the jacket. It fit perfectly. He stood in front of the mirror, studying his reflection. The man staring back was still gaunt, still haunted, but there was something different in his eyes. A flicker of possibility. The VA medical evaluation was thorough and exhausting. 3 hours of being examined by doctors who seemed genuinely interested in helping. They documented his physical injuries, the lingering pain from an IED blast, hearing loss, chronic tremor. They ran cognitive tests, depression screenings, PTSD assessments. The psychiatrist, Dr. Reyes, spent an hour just talking. She asked about his service, his family, his years on the street. She didn't flinch when he described the panic attacks, the nightmares, the times he'd wanted to end it all. When the session ended, she prescribed new medications and scheduled weekly therapy appointments. You've been self-medicating with isolation, Dr. Reyes said. That's common. But isolation is gasoline on the fire of PTSD. What you need is connection, structure, and time. That evening, he attended his first group therapy session. 12 veterans sat in a circle, representing wars from Vietnam to Afghanistan. When it was his turn, Ghost almost passed. But then he looked around and saw his own pain reflected in their faces. I'm struggling with feeling like I don't deserve this, Ghost said. A week ago, I was homeless. Now I have housing, money, people helping me. And I keep waiting for someone to realize they made a mistake. An older Vietnam vet named Frank nodded slowly. That's the voice of trauma talking. It's a liar. The truth is, you've always been worth saving. It just took the right people to show up and prove it. Over the next 2 weeks, Ghost fell into a routine. Wake at 6 a.m., coffee, breakfast, daily walks, therapy appointments, job interviews coordinated by Axel's network, evening group sessions. The structure was both comforting and terrifying. The job interviews were difficult. Ghost had a 7-year gap in his resume that was hard to explain, but Axel's contacts understood. 3 companies offered positions: construction equipment operator, night shift security guard, and warehouse inventory manager. Ghost chose construction. It paid well, offered benefits, and the work was physical, something he could lose himself in. His start date was set for early December, giving him 3 weeks to continue stabilizing. Reaper checked in twice a week, either in person or by phone. He never asked if Ghost was okay. He asked what Ghost needed. During one visit, Reaper brought news. "We're planning a Thanksgiving ride, about 200 riders. We'd like you to come." Ghost's first instinct was to refuse. That many people, that much noise, it sounded overwhelming. But then he remembered the morning beneath the Morrison Bridge, the 400 riders standing in silent salute. "I'll think about it," Ghost said. 2 weeks became a turning point. Ghost gained 10 pounds from regular meals. His tremor decreased as medications took effect. He started sleeping through most nights. The nightmares didn't disappear, but they became less frequent. The day before Thanksgiving, he made a decision that terrified him more than combat ever had. He called his ex-wife. "James?" Sarah's voice was cautious. "Hi, Sarah. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to call. I'm getting help. Real help. I'm off the street. I have housing. I have a job starting next month." Silence. Then softly, "I'm glad. I was wondering if maybe, someday, I could see Emily. Not now. I know I'm not ready. But someday." Sarah was quiet for a long time. "Let me think about it. She's 14 now. She has her own opinions. If she wants to see you, we'll figure something out. But you need to prove you're serious." "I understand," Ghost said. "And Sarah, thank you for not hanging up." After the call, Ghost sat staring at Emily's photograph. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even a maybe, but it was the smallest crack in a door that had been welded shut for 6 years. And right now, that was enough. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and clear. Ghost stood in the parking lot at 8 a.m., wearing his donated leather jacket. His heart hammered. 200 motorcycles, 200 riders. The rational part of his brain knew they were allies, but the traumatized part saw threats, potential ambushes. Maya pulled up on her Sportster. "Ready?" "No," Ghost said honestly, "but I'm here anyway. That's all that matters." She tossed him a helmet. "You're riding with Reaper." Reaper arrived minutes later. Ghost climbed awkwardly onto the passenger seat. It had been over a decade since he'd been on a motorcycle. The leather seat was firm, the bike vibrating beneath him with barely contained power. "You good?" Reaper asked. "I will be," Ghost said. They rode to the staging area, the same industrial lot where the convoy had assembled 2 weeks earlier. 200 motorcycles filled the lot. The Iron Riders, the War Dogs, the Forgotten Soldiers, the Liberty Riders. Riders stood in clusters, drinking coffee, checking their bikes. The plan was simple: a memorial ride to honor fallen veterans, followed by community Thanksgiving dinner at the Iron Riders Clubhouse. The route would take them through Portland, past the Veterans Memorial, and out to a cemetery where several club members were buried. At 9:30 a.m., the convoy formed. The ride began. They moved through the city in tight formation, 4 across, moving at 35 miles per hour. Traffic parted for them. Ghost watched the world slide past, feeling the wind cut through his jacket, the vibration of the engine traveling up through his legs. It was terrifying and exhilarating, a reminder that he was alive. They reached the Veterans Memorial around 10:15 a.m., a granite monument overlooking the Willamette River, engraved with names of Oregon service members killed in action. The convoy parked. Riders dismounted, forming a semicircle around the memorial. Cole stepped forward, holding a wreath. He placed it at the base of the monument, then stood at attention. The entire group followed suit, 200 veterans standing in silence. No speeches, just the weight of shared loss, acknowledged and honored. Ghost found himself scanning the names. He didn't know most of them, but he recognized the units. Brothers and sisters who'd walked the same roads he had, but hadn't made it home. The tears came quietly, and he didn't bother wiping them away. He wasn't the only one crying. If you've ever believed that one small gesture can change the world, hit that like button, because Ghost's story is far from over. Drop a comment and tell me, what does true brotherhood mean to you? The ride to the cemetery was quieter, more somber. They passed through neighborhoods where American flags hung from porches. At one intersection, an elderly man in a Vietnam veteran cap stood at attention, saluting as the bikes rolled by. The cemetery was on a hillside overlooking farmland. The group parked and walked to specific gravesites, club members who died in combat or from injuries, or from the slower death of addiction and despair that claimed so many veterans. Reaper led Ghost to a grave marked Robert Tank Morrison, U.S. Army, 1985-2014, Iron Riders MC, forever our brother. Tank was my best friend, Reaper said quietly. We served together in Iraq, started the Iron Riders together. He made it through 2 tours just to die in a car accident because some drunk driver crossed the median. He paused. I used to come here angry. Now I remember the good stuff. Ghost knelt beside him. He'd be proud of what you did for me. He'd have done the same thing, Reaper said. They spent another hour at the cemetery before returning to the clubhouse. The parking lot was packed. Families, local veterans, community supporters. Inside, long tables were laden with food: turkeys, ham, mashed potatoes, stuffing, cranberry sauce, pumpkin pies. Ghost hesitated. This many people, this much noise. It triggered every combat instinct. But Maya appeared at his elbow. Stay close. If it gets too much, we step outside. They found seats with Tiny, Axel, Carmen, and other Iron Riders. Ghost ate slowly, listening more than talking. This was what Dr. Reyes had meant about connection being the antidote to isolation. Midway through dinner, Reaper stood and tapped his glass. The room quieted. 2 weeks ago, we rode out to help one man, Ghost. Today, I want him to know that the ride wasn't just about helping him. It was about reminding all of us why we do this. He gestured around the room. We ride because we're brothers and sisters, because we don't leave anyone behind. Ghost gave me $5 when he had nothing. That act reminded me what honor looks like. The room erupted in applause. When the noise died down, Reaper raised his glass. To the fallen, to the living, and to the veterans still fighting battles nobody sees. We've got your 6, always. 200 voices echoed, always. Winter settled over Portland. Ghost started his construction job the first week of December, reporting to a site in Beaverton. The work was physical and demanding, operating heavy machinery, grading soil, assisting with foundation pours. His body ached, but it was the good kind of pain. His foreman was a former Marine named Dutch, who'd lost his left hand in Fallujah. Dutch didn't coddle Ghost, but he also didn't push him beyond his limits. When Ghost had a panic attack during the first week, triggered by a pneumatic drill that sounded like gunfire, Dutch simply walked him away from the site, let him sit in the truck until his breathing steadied, then sent him home with full pay. PTSD doesn't make you weak, Dutch said. It makes you human. You show up tomorrow, we try again. A Ghost showed up, and the day after that. By the 3rd week, he was operating equipment unsupervised, earning respect through competence and reliability. The money from construction, combined with VA disability payments, gave Ghost financial stability for the first time in years. He opened a bank account, bought a used smartphone, started putting money aside in savings. The therapy continued, weekly sessions with Dr. Reyes. Group therapy twice a week, where Ghost had graduated from listener to occasional speaker. He shared stories about his daughter, about the guilt of being an absent father. Frank told him, redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about proving the past doesn't define your future. When you're ready, you reach out, and you let her make the choice. In mid-December, Ghost attended his first Iron Riders Club meeting as a guest. At the end, Reaper made an announcement. Ghost embodies what this club stands for. I'm formally proposing that we sponsor Ghost for membership, not because we feel sorry for him, but because he's earned it. Cole stood. I second the proposal. Reaper looked at Ghost. Membership is a choice, no pressure, but if you want it, the path is open. I'd be honored, Ghost managed. The vote was unanimous. Christmas came with unexpected warmth. Sarah called Christmas Eve. Emily wants to talk to you, just for a few minutes. Ghost's heart nearly stopped. Yes? Then a younger voice. Dad? Emily. Hi, sweetheart. It's so good to hear your voice. Mum told me you're doing better. I am. I'm working construction. I'm in therapy. I'm trying to be the person I should have been for you. Why did you leave? Ghost closed his eyes. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I was sick. My brain was broken from the war. I thought you'd be better off without me. I was wrong. Oh, are you still broken? A little bit. But I'm healing. Mom says maybe I can see you if you stay stable. I'm going to stay stable, Ghost said. I promise. They talked for 10 more minutes. When they hung up, Ghost sat for an hour, staring at her photograph, allowing himself to believe that maybe he could be a father again someday. By late January, Ghost had been at the veteran housing facility for 3 months. Patricia sat down with him one afternoon. You're ready. It's time to think about getting your own place. The idea terrified Ghost, but it also meant independence. Carmen helped him apartment hunt. They found a 1-bedroom in Gresham, close to the construction site. The Iron Riders threw him a housewarming party, showing up with furniture and supplies. As Ghost stood in his new apartment, his first truly independent living space in 8 years, he felt hope. Spring arrived with cherry blossoms. Ghost had been working construction for 6 months, had been a full-patch Iron Rider for 4 months, and had been living independently for 2 months. He'd had setbacks, but also victories. A promotion at work, weekly phone calls with Emily. One Saturday in April, Reaper called. Meet me at the Morrison Bridge, same spot. I want to show you something. Ghost rode his new Harley Sportster to the overpass. Reaper was waiting with Maya, Tiny, Axel, and a dozen other Iron Riders. They stood near the concrete pillar where Ghost's tent had once been. Someone had painted a mural, a massive eagle, wings spread, clutching a banner that read, "Brothers don't charge brothers." Below it, "In honor of all veterans still fighting. You are not forgotten." Ghost stared, vision blurring. You did this? The city gave us permission, Maya said. We wanted to mark this spot. Reaper handed Ghost spray paint. We left one spot blank. We want you to add something. Ghost looked at the blank space. He thought about the $5 bill, about the 400 riders, about the months of healing. He thought about Emily, about the life he was rebuilding. He knelt down and wrote, "The road is long, but we ride together." When he stood, Reaper clasped his shoulder. You did it, brother. You made it back. Ghost looked around at the faces surrounding him. No, we did it. I couldn't have made it back alone. They climbed onto their bikes. As they rode away, Ghost in the middle of the pack, he allowed himself to look forward instead of back. The road was long, but for the first time in years, he wasn't walking it alone. And that made all the difference. Thank you for riding with Ghost on this journey. If his story moved you, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Drop a comment below and tell us, what does it mean to truly have someone's back? Because in a world that often forgets its heroes, we believe every veteran's story matters. Ride safe, brothers and sisters. Until next time.